the Deer King of the Banyan. In one of his previous incarnations, the Buddha incarnated in the form of a deer in a forest near Kashi, which later received the name of Varanasi or Benares. Over the years, he grew into a beautiful golden stag. His eyes shone like two stars. His mouth was as red as the forest berries. His hooves were black and as bright as night in the Thar Desert, and everyone who saw them said that his antlers were made of silver. Besides being beautiful, this golden deer was also compassionate and just, so much so that he became the king of a herd of 500 deer, the herd of the Banyan. In the same forest there was another herd of deer that were equally numerous, the herd of the antlers, and their king was likewise a noble, beautiful, and impressive golden deer. Around that time, Brahmadatta was crowned king of Kashi. Brahmadatta was a man of good heart, but he had regrettable tastes and pursuits. He liked to hunt. Obviously, a king did not need to hunt for survival. Instead, Brahmana hunted for pleasure. In addition, he loved venison above all other foods, as you can imagine. This combination of interests did not bode well for the herds of deer who lived in the forest near Kashi. Brahmanan went out almost every day to hunt, starting each time from a different village. The people of the villages were thus obliged to set aside their own work in order to accomplish and serve the king and his hunting parties. The people of the village began to get frustrated with the number of interruptions the king was subjecting them to. The farmers could not take care of their fields, so the crops were harvested haphazardly and later than they should be. The merchants and traders did not have the time to take care of their business properly. So the people from all the villages gathered together and decided to build a big deer park for the king next to Kashi. That way, they thought, the king could easily hunt any time he wished, and he would not need to recruit villagers to help him. No sooner said than done. The peasants built a high palace around a large meadow dotted with dense groves of trees and bushes, and they dug ponds where the deer could drink and bathe. They opened the large door in the palisade and began banging sticks and poles to create a deafening noise. They drove the deer out of the forest and into the park. When the last deer had gone through, the door was closed. The representatives of the village went to visit the king and said, "Your Majesty, as you know, we've always been willing to help your hunting parties, but our fields and businesses are increasingly neglected because of this, and we have families to feed. We know that you are a wise king, and that consequently you would know how to value what we have created for you. We have made you a nice deer park next to the sea, in which we have gathered two big herds for your enjoyment. Now you can go hunting whenever you want to, without needing to recruit villages for each outing. Days that you do not go out hunting, you can still have fresh venison, because your own cooks will be able to kill all the meat they need." The king, who was not a bad man, understood perfectly the problems brought to him by the peasants and merchants of the village, and agreed to the initiative. The following day, Brahmadatta went to the park and was pleased to see so many deer roaming the grounds. It did not take him long to discern two golden stags of impressive stature, which he supposed to be kings of the herd. Brahmanana pointed them out to his assistant, the chief of the guard, and his cook, giving the order that those two deer should not be slaughtered under any circumstances. Every day Brahmadatta came to the park and killed a deer, which was taken by the cook to prepare dishes for the king's table. Sometimes, if the king was very busy, it was the cook himself who gave the order to the chef of the guard to kill a deer. But as soon as the deer saw the bows and arrows, they panicked. They ran from here to there. They crashed against trees or got caught between them, hooking their antlers and wounding themselves, twisting their legs and breaking bones with the falls. Others were injured by the loose arrows. The king of the Banyan herd was saddened by all the injuries, deaths, and panics, so he went to see the king of the antler herd. It is clear that we are trapped here, at least for the moment, the Banyan stag said. We may have to face this unfortunate situation for a while, but we should at least try to reduce the suffering of everyone as much as possible. I agree, said the antler stag. I've also been thinking about this, but I do not know what we can do. Well, the Banyan deer said, I thought something that, although it is very hard to accept, could at least limit the damage to the result of the deer in both herds. Since the human king only needs the meat of one deer a day, I suggest that one of us could be chosen by lot each day, and that deer should go directly to King Brahmadatta to be killed, or to the chopping block to be sacrificed by the cook. One day we would choose one of my herd, and the next day a deer of yours. In this way we could avoid the chaos and mad racing that causes so many injuries and wounds. I agree with your proposal, the stag of the antlers said, and addressing the other deer in both herds, he asked, what do you think? After some debate, the members of both herds were unanimous in accepting the proposal of the Banyan stag. The next day, when the king and his men looked over the palisade of the park, they saw a single deer standing there. He was shaking with fear, but he held his antlers high with pride. The king paused thoughtfully. He realized what had happened. The king of both herds, those magnificent golden stags, had convinced their herds to sacrifice one deer each day in order to avoid injuries to the rest. Brahmadatta fell into a deep sadness in the face of the nobility of those animals. After a few minutes of reflection, he said to his men, you will no longer hunt among the herds. You only kill the deer that is offered to you every day down here for the sacrifice. He put away his bow, climbed down from the palisade, and rode silently back to his palace, absorbed in his sad thoughts. That night he slept restlessly and dreamed that a bright deer gazed at him sadly as he approached. Thus, for a time, a deer was chosen by lot, by turns from each herd, and was sent to the chopping block of the Kashi's king cook. Injuries and wounds were avoided in this way, and despite their gloomy fate and deep anguish of seeing one of them leave each day, the deer were able to live in some tranquility. Despite having improved the situation slightly, the Banyan instead felt his soul break every day when he saw a deer leave their herds and walk towards its death. Day after day, He tried to encourage the deer of his herd so that they would not lose hope. Try not to think beyond the present, he told them, as the sun lit his shining eyes. Enjoy the fresh air you breathe and the comfortable grass that welcomes you when resting. Let yourself be warmed by the sun. Do not give up. As long as we live, there will be hope. I will find a way out of here. One day, the tragic draw fell on a pregnant hind of the herd of the antlers. The doe went to see her king and said, I'm ready to take my destiny, but not before my fawn was born. Understand me, please, she insisted. If I go now, two will die. I do not ask you to save my life. I'm not asking for myself, but for my fawn. Let my little one be born, and I swear that the next day I will take place on the block. But the antler stag responded sadly, the law is the law. I cannot change the rules now, and therefore I cannot spare you from your destiny. Please understand me. Fate has chosen you, and there can be no exceptions. You have to go. Desperate, the doe went to the deer king of the Banyan. Folding her front legs, she knelt before him and begged him to do something. The Banyan stag watched her silently, sweetly, moved to the depths of his heart. Get up, sister, the deer king said fondly. For once we will change the rules. Do not worry. Calm down and rest. You are not going to be sacrificed. I will take care of everything. The doe looked at him with relief and gratitude, though not joy, for she knew that whenever the Banyan stag did, some others would have to take her place. The Banyan stag lowered his head and closed his eyes. He knew that the time had come to behave like a true king. Then he raised his head again, his magnificent silver antlers outlined against the sky. My position and king and leaders force me to assume what no one else can take on, he thought to himself. I will take her place. He walked slowly and with dignity towards the door of the palisade, while the members of his herd watched him pass by. They knew what he was going to do. They knew him well. He would not allow such injustice to take place, even if it cost him his life. A deep silence descended over the park when the Banyan king arrived at the door of the palisade. When the cook saw him, he said to the soldiers, Do not shoot. The two golden stags must not die. This is what the king decreed. He immediately sent a messenger to the king. Soon after that, Brahmadatta appeared at the palisade. The king of Kashi met the eyes of the king of the deer and realized this was the deer from his dreams. Dear king of the Banyan, Brahmadatta said at last, I know you, for you have been visiting me in my dreams. Why are you here? I freed you from this commitment, you and the other king of the other herd. Why do you offer yourself for sacrifice when I do not want your death? O king of men, replied the Banyan deer, today the sacrifice has fallen to a pregnant hind who has begged me to do something to free her from this obligation, at least until after her fawn is born. But I could not do anything other than take her place. I could not condemn another of our people to die when luck had favored them. I could not force the death penalty on someone whom fate had not called. So this must be my time who takes the place. The deer king of the Banyan lowered his head and swallowed, and then raised his magnificent antlers to the sky and said, "Go ahead, shoot your arrows." The soldiers looked at the king, waiting for an order, but Brahmadatta could not speak. Two large tears rolled down his cheeks. How could he have been so blind, so insensitive to the feelings of these noble animals, he wondered. In truth, he felt ashamed of the suffering humans caused to beings who were just as sensitive to pain and the anguish of death as they were. "O great king, O great dear king," Brahmananda said at last, "you are right. A king must take responsibility for all his subjects. Not even among human beings have I witnessed as much nobility as you have demonstrated today, along with compassion and generosity. I beg you to forgive me for not being aware of the pain and suffering of deer." He continued, "You and all the deer prisoners of this park are free to return to your forest. You may graze where you wish to on my lands. No one will hunt you again. Go and live in peace." "Sir, your kindness moves me," the deer king of the Banyan replied. "But what will happen to the other animals, birds, and fish that suffer, just as we do, and you do? Will you hunt them now that you have freed us from suffering?" "Noble king," Brahmadatta replied with tears in his eyes, "I never would have thought that I could see things as clearly as I'm seeing them now. Please take my word that while they are in my kingdom, no animal, bird, or fish will be killed by the hand of a man. Listen to me, all courtiers and assistants present here," he shouted. "I decree that from today, all beings in my kingdom will be considered my subjects. Therefore, they must not be hunted or killed. I order you to go forth and announce this decree throughout the country." Brahmanand returned his attention to the Banyan king. "Tell me, compassionate king of the deer, is your heart at peace with me now?" "Yes, great king," Brahmadatta replied the golden stag. "My heart is at peace." The people of the kingdom were amazed at first, but they complied with the royal order, and the animals were no longer hunted and massacred in those lands. Since the kingdom came to depend upon the crops in the fields, the farmers and the lands became more respected. As for the deer king of the Banyan and the two herds that were once imprisoned in the park, they returned to the depths of the forest, where they had led a life free from the anguish, hiding, and fleeing. Adapted by Graham A. Katnanda, 2018.